And not only did we catch it, we are now the king of ventilators all over the world, and that wasn't playing well. So then they said, testing. Oh, we'll get them on testing. Well, testing is much easier than ventilators. But it used to be ventilators. Now it's testing.
You seem to maybe possibly be implying that talking about testing is a personal attack on you. Can you explain why you think talking about testing is a personal attack, given that the access to testing has been an issue for a long time? There's bipartisan outcry still today that there's not enough testing. Why do you think it's a personal attack on you?
Well, it's not bipartisan. It's mostly partisan. But more importantly than mostly partisan, it's incorrect. We have tremendous testing capability. Remember this, we've tested more than any country in the world by far. In fact, I think I read where if you add up every other country in the world, we've tested more. But remember this, we're dealing in politics. We're dealing with a thing called November 3rd of this year.
Hey, welcome back to Morning Joe. It's Tuesday, April 21st. We hope you're having a better day than the President of the United States this morning. He's Mika and Willie, he's continuing to tweet. And as you all know, and as our viewers know, I recommended to the President several years ago to please stop watching our show, that he'd be better for it, the country would be better for it, he'd be able to work more clearly. But he just can't get it out of his head. He can't quit us, and that makes me sad. And Willie, the tweets continue, and now he's talking again as we have deaths over 43,000. They'll beat 50,000 too soon, even though Trump wackos are doing conspiracy theories, saying those numbers are padded when everybody actually says it. Just the opposite. Other wackos are spreading conspiracy theories that these lockdowns were some scheme by Democrats, when it was the president who yesterday said if we didn't have the lockdowns, 1 million or 2 million people would die. But the president this morning, in the middle of a pandemic that has killed more Americans that were killed on 9/11, in a 19-year war in Afghanistan, in both Iraq wars, more Americans killed by this pandemic, which the president said was only one person coming in from China and would go away magically in April. More Americans have died in this pandemic than died in the entire Korean War in combat deaths. In the middle of this, quote, war, as the president called it, he's tweeting about his ratings. I had great ratings my whole life. And so we won't read the rest of that. But he's as America is falling further behind per capita in testing, Donald Trump is talking about ratings at his afternoon press conference. You would think news executives would look at that and say, hey, wait a second, maybe this guy's not being serious, and maybe we shouldn't be running.
We shouldn't. These things go on forever.
Vanity projects by the president. No news value. Willie?
No, the news value comes when the doctors eventually speak, or in those periods between the president's speeches or Q&A sessions. We get some kernels of information from those doctors. But I would like to know from the president, which is true. Is it that your stay-at-home orders have worked and continue to work to flatten the curve? As he said yesterday, he said 1 million or 2 million people would have died if we hadn't done what we've done, which is to lock down portions of the country, to lock down many of these states. Or is it true that those states need to be, quote, liberated? Which is it? Because some of these governors are taking their cues from President Trump, obviously, as they have for many years in the state of Georgia, for example, in the state of Tennessee, in the state of South Carolina, and liberating themselves, if you will, and saying that in case of Georgia, by Friday, we can open some of these businesses. In Tennessee, by next week, on May the 1st, the stay-at-home order will be through it and we can move on. So does the president say to those governors who are moving forward, implicitly perhaps, based on what he said about liberating and he didn't want to shut down the economies, or is he saying that stay-at-home orders have worked that social distancing
Right.
has worked to flatten the curve and continues to work and needs to continue to be implemented in these states so that we don't see flare-ups again. I would like to see the president clarify that message. I'm not worried about his ratings or what he's watching this morning or his thoughts about you, Joe. I'd like to know about testing and whether or not he actually believes stay-at-home orders work.
Well, the answer is both.
But you think about the
because
recklessness.
he likes to waver between the both to have no responsibility. And yes, it's reckless, Joe.
Talk about the recklessness also of his biggest lackeys in the media.
I know.
I don't want to even use their names.
No, not worth it.
Not worth it, but you've known one of these lackeys for quite some time. And again, we won't mention his name. But he's saying that the death toll is padded. At the same time, the President of the United States is saying that 1 million people could have died. At the same time, nurses and doctors across America are saying they think the number of deaths are even higher. At the same time, medical officials are saying that more people are dying because they're staying at home, afraid to come into the hospital, that have other treatments done other than being treated for the coronavirus. And yet these reckless conspiracies, I just wonder, are a few extra clicks really worth endangering the lives of your parents and your grandparents and your neighbors and the people you go to church with, the people you go to synagogues with? Like what is worth that?
I don't know. A lot of these folks actually come from the Dartmouth Review back in the day, and they called themselves true conservatives.
No.
Yeah. I'd look in the mirror.
Not even
you've
close.
Been wasting your time. And
Not even
Bill
close.
Buckley, your hero, would spit, honestly.